So today we are going to be talking about keyboards, mice, and other input devices. And so we've talked about a computer system and how a computer system functions. And now we're getting really more into that first section, the input. There has to be a way to get the input into the computer. And so these are some main input devices that you use and what you're used to using. I'd say that the most common input devices are indeed keyboards and mice. So we will be going into those, and then we'll get into like preventative maintenance and how they function and all that good stuff. So starting out first with keyboards. So keyboards are one of the first peripherals, to be used with computers, and it is still the primary input device for entering text and numbers. Some people believe that when computers can understand handwriting and speech, keyboarding will become unnecessary. And I know that there are some that are starting to do that and understand the handwriting and the speech, but that technology hasn't really come into full effect yet and probably won't for some time still. So it is very important that you know how to use a keyboard in the correct way, which is why we do typing in here, and it remains one of the most common ways to enter text and other data into a computer. And in the early days, computers actually accepted inputs on cards and paper tape. So your input was literally a piece of paper tape that you had to feed into the computer. So a keyboard is a lot easier than doing that. The first keyboards actually appeared back in 1983, and today most keyboards are IB enhanced AT style keyboards. The ones that you are currently working with in this classroom are IB enhanced AT style. So those are really the only ones that are available nowadays, but there used to be different types of keyboards. In the early days. So this is kind of like the standard of today is the IB enhanced AT style. So when it comes to a keyboard, the standard keyboard, so just like the one that you have, the layout consists of 5 different groups of keys. So there's the alphanumeric keys, which is like the alphabet with the numbers on top. There's a numeric keypad, which is usually on the right side of the keyboard. There are the function keys, so that is usually on the very top of your keyboard, like the F1, F2, F3, and so on and so forth. There are also the cursor movement keys, and that is those little arrows that you can move up, down, and left or right. And then the last main group of keys is the modifier keys. So that is like your shift or alt. And I actually have a diagram on the next slide that will go into more detail with that. So that'll help you out a little bit. So as you can see from this diagram, we have the alphanumeric keys. That's the main portion of your keyboard. Again, that is all of the alphabet, plus those numbers that are right next to it on top of those. That is all a part of the alphanumeric keys. The space bar is also included in the alphanumeric keyboard, as well as like punctuation marks. Those are all considered in that. Next then, you have the modifier keys. So the modifier keys, which caps lock actually should be a part of that too. So just pretend that that little pink part is on there. It's like your shift, your control, your alt. So it modifies what the key does when you click it. So for example, when you shift and click A, then you're putting a capital A, or that's what you want the keyboard to do, is put a capital A on your Word doc or whatever it may be. Whereas if you don't shift, it would just be a lowercase a. So it is modifying that key to be something different than what it usually is. Then you have the cursor movement keys. And so that, again, the main ones are those arrows that move up or down. You also have like the home button. So when you click the home It'll take you to, like, for example, in Excel, it would take you to the top of that. You also have like the print screen. So when you click your print screen, it would print your screen. All of that is on there. There's a page up, page down. So again, it's moving the page up or down. So it's kind of like doing what a cursor would do. And that makes it so that you don't have to have a mouse plugged in. And then the next ones you have is the numeric keypad, and that is useful for when you're using something. If you have to use numbers a lot, you actually use like 3 fingers and type with that. There is actually a section of this in microtype that we will be using eventually. That's the last kind of section that we do in microtype, but you use like 3 fingers and then you can type a lot faster on those, and it's a lot easier to get numbers through. And the last little section is the function keys. So that's just F1 through F12 up on top of the alphanumeric keys. So keyboards, for long periods of time on the keyboard, it can cause injuries. Therefore, you want to make sure that you're using good keyboard practices. So remember on like day 2, when we started in microtype, I gave you those 6 steps to good keyboarding, and that's good keyboarding practice. So those steps are like feet flat on the floor, back straight, eyes front, elbows in, lift to your wrist, and a curl to your fingers. So make sure that you are doing that whenever you are working in microtype. Another thing to use, which we unfortunately don't have here, is an ergonomically designed keyboard, because that will help to prevent some of those injuries as well. So those usually help with like carpal tunnel if you're typing a lot or something along those lines. And that picture down at the bottom is just an example of an ergonomically designed keyboard. So as you can see, it's just a little bit different, like it's tilted a little bit differently, or I guess angled might be the right word. It's angled a little bit differently than like the keyboard that's probably right in front of you right now. So now we've learned kind of some background on the keyboard. So how does the keyboard function? Well, this little diagram really goes through everything. So the first step is that the key is pressed on the keyboard. Then the keyboard controller sends the scan code for the key to the keyboard buffer. And that keyboard controller then sends an interrupt request to the system software. And then the system software responds to the interrupt by reading the scan code from the keyboard buffer. And the system software then passes that scan code to the CPU, which the CPU processes and puts up whatever that might be. So if you typed in or if you pressed the A key, then it would go through all of that just so that the CPU could process that you typed the A, and that would show up on your screen. And all of that happens like that, which I just snapped. Sorry, you can't see that. So it's in like milliseconds. All of that is happening in your computer in order to get that input to be shown as an output. So when it comes to keyboards, there's some preventative maintenance you can do. So when you have a keyboard, you want to obviously take care of it. Again, that's why I am so crazy about not having food or water in the back, so that you're not getting anything gross in the keys and they don't stick. But if that happens, some things that you can do is to disconnect the keyboard from the computer. That's the first thing you want to do. Then you should vacuum the keys to remove any loose dust or crumbs or debris, and a small brush a small brush can also loosen some of that material. So just to make sure that your keyboard is in tip-top shape and that the keys aren't sticking or that a key isn't working, you might want to do some of that just to help the keyboard keep running as it should. Oh, and also, sorry, I thought I was done with that. A can of compressed air can also help to remove that dust. I think that's actually probably the best way to do it. And then if you want to clean like the actual keys, using just like Windex or something along those lines with a cloth,